Disclaimer: although our guest this week is a managing partner of a registered investment advisor, nothing in this podcast should be considered an offer of Multicoin's investment advisory services or should otherwise be confused for investment, tax, legal, or other financial advice. Today's guest is Kyle Samani. He is the managing partner at Multicoin, and we are recording live at the Digital Asset Summit with him. He sat down with Bo Hines, and we'll talk more about that. He also was at the White House Crypto Summit. He's in the investor world, the American founders. He's doing it all. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Jacqueline, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. The first question that we always love to ask is, what does crypto in America mean to you?
To me, crypto in America means having entrepreneurs, American entrepreneurs, building their teams here, developing that IP, doing that innovation, and ultimately focusing their products and efforts on the U.S. markets. Under the Biden administration, American founders were, quite frankly, harassed, chastised, in many cases, forced out of the country. A lot of our portfolio companies actually left the United States under the Biden administration, and that was really unfortunate to see. And we are now encouraging all of our portfolio companies to come back to the U.S. And even more importantly, we're now encouraging the next wave of entrepreneurs who are going to build in crypto to build in America.
They want to come back?
Oh, God, they're so excited to come back.
Yes, I get that. Nothing like home.
It's very difficult for them, for their families, brothers, sisters, etc. And it's awesome to see. I mean, it's not just been like one random remark here or there from Trump or from Sachs, but repeated, consistent efforts, and seeing the EOs coming from David Sachs and Bo's team, and the momentum we're seeing in Congress, like the message is being repeatedly put out on the megaphone to all the entrepreneurs, to all the bank executives, all the fintech executives all over the world. Crypto is going to be at home in America.
Yeah. So Kyle, as general counsel of one of those portfolio companies at Say, great to see you guys spend more time in DC, where I live. What brought you guys, what brought that call to action? How did you guys decide to get involved this time around?
Yeah. Multicoin, we were a little bit politically active in 2022 and really ramped it up a lot in 24. And it was kind of like we started the stance and then started the date, and then, started to kind of progress that relationship with not only with David and his team, but with the Republican Party and with the president's team as well. Started off with just some fundraisers here and there for some senators. And then, as we started to see the president talk about crypto kind of publicly for the first time. I think it was late May. And, then David called us and said, hey, I'm doing this fundraiser for the president. I think he's going to be pro-crypto. So we went to that. And then from there, just kind of everything started to really snowball. And, probably by 2 weeks after going to David's house for that fundraiser, it became clear that it's like, hey, we probably should go to the RNC. So I went to the RNC. And from there, just kind of everything snowballed. And we really ramped up our engagement, our spending, our time with senators, congresspeople, and of course, the president's team.
What's the biggest thing you've learned from engaging on the political level, political spectrum? What would you want crypto investors and our listeners to know?
I think the biggest thing I've learned in engaging with politicians has been these guys want this to happen. When I talk with folks like Senator Hagerty, when I talk to folks like Senator Lummis, Congressman Hill, and a lot of other folks, they have a very principled view about why they think crypto is important. They're not here to tell me which coin they want to buy or sell. Obviously, a lot of their kids do trade crypto, and that's actually how most of them learn about it, is actually from their kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely Senator Lummis.
That's not my dad.
Barron is very famous for trading, crypto. And so, they learn about it, and then they talk to guys like me, and they kind of realize the very deep principled perspectives on freedom, censorship resistance, improvement in DeFi rails, and capital efficiency and finance. And they come to really, through that process, recognize how antiquated and crappy the banks are. And they're like, there is an opportunity to do this better. And it's been very refreshing for me to see politicians who otherwise were not particularly interested in technology really be like, hey, wait a minute, there's a better way to do this. And that's been incredible to see.
So you think they get it? Do they get it now?
Not all of them, but certainly the ones that you see on TV talking about it, it's a deep first principled perspective on why they should care.
And what do they care about necessarily?
For different folks, it's definitely different things. Senator Lummis is diehard Bitcoin advocate, as an example, and she's on TV almost every day talking about that. You talk to folks like Congressman Hill, who is going to be probably the primary author of market structure legislation, and he comes at this from a private equity and banking perspective. And so he looks at this as like ways to better facilitate capital formation while protecting investors. You look at folks like Senator Haggerty, he was previously the ambassador to Japan. He thinks a lot about U.S. foreign interests and our relationship with other countries. And, he is the primary author of the stablecoin bill in the Senate. And so he looks at this as like a way to extend American power and influence via stablecoins. And so, like, everyone in Congress loves crypto for different reasons. I mean, they all see the other stuff too, but most of them like have a different one thing that like really they gravitate towards. And we work as closely as we can on all of them on the areas that they are the most passionate about.
And so, Kyle, as somebody who's spent time on the Hill trying to educate some of those legislators about the things that they care about, I'm curious from your perspective, and there's been probably most notably the folks at Andreessen also doing a lot of policy work on the sorts of things they care about. What does Multicoin care about other than, of course, having founders build in the United States? Like, what are some of the policy issues sort of near and dear to you guys' hearts?
I mean, there's a ton of them. I'll just flag a couple of them that I shared at the White House Digital Asset Summit a week or two ago. One is tax policy for miners and for stakers. Today, I won't get into the details other than to say there's a lot of obvious double tax inefficiencies in how staking and how mining works. I can tell you that Sachs and the president understand these issues, and I think we're going to get pretty good guidance from these guys in the not too distant future to resolve these tax inefficiencies. Another one that strikes me is repatriation of capital. So most of the crypto foundations that issue these tokens are based offshore. The two largest are the Ethereum Foundation and Solana Foundation. Both of them are based in Switzerland. All of their assets are therefore held under Swiss law and Swiss banks and such. And a lot of those teams want to repatriate some or all of those dollars in the United States and then use that capital to hire people, do contract work, whatever, in the United States. And like, there's a massive tax inefficiency for them to move that capital to the U.S. So we want to create kind of like a tax holiday to basically say, hey guys, we know all of y'all were offshore because of the Biden administration. There's an opportunity here. One time, get everything to the U.S. We're going to open up the window so you guys can do so tax-free and bring that money to the U.S. and then invest, of course, in the U.S. So that's been a really big item that's been on our minds. And then I'd say a last one I'll get into is labor and green cards. Crypto is a more global industry. It's probably the most global sector of software. And I'll contrast that with AI. AI is heavily concentrated in San Francisco in the Bay Area. And, crypto, I mean, most of the exchanges around the world are based in Asia. We have portfolio founders in Europe, in India, in Southeast Asia, in Hong Kong, LATAM, all over the world. And crypto by its very nature is global. The whole point of stablecoins is to get people outside of America to adopt stablecoins. And so we meet a lot of these guys around the world. And what we would love is to, not all of them, but some of them actually are better off being in the U.S. and want to make it as easy as possible for those founders to spend either part or all of their time here in the U.S. And obviously, need to have a rigorous application and screening process. But if you've got enough venture capital funding, that's a very positive signal that the government can use and say, okay, y'all are probably these entrepreneurs, are net accretive for them to be in the U.S. as opposed to be elsewhere, to bring in that tax revenue and to, of course, create those jobs.
Yeah, I think as a portfolio company, we're very enthusiastic about seeing some of that talent be able to come build in America with us. So yeah, I totally agree there.
With it being sort of open season, as it were, in the U.S. right now, how is the competitive landscape in the VC space for you guys? Do you see a lot of other crypto VCs going to be popping up in the next few years? How is the landscape from your point of view at this moment and down the line?
I don't think that the new administration is in and of itself going to be the thing that causes new venture firms to pop up. I think most VCs and LPs will tell you that there's too much venture money in crypto, and I agree with that assessment. And so I don't think there's a ton of excitement for LPs to fund a lot of new VCs. I do think where you will see new VC dollars enter crypto is from more traditional VC firms that don't have a crypto specialization. Those guys have, I'd say, started to dip their toe in the water starting about a year ago. And I suspect most of them have already had private internal sessions saying, hey, we need that one partner who's going to try and cover this area and kind of make sense of it. And I think most major VCs today are looking to get more crypto exposure. I don't think they'll be quite as indiscriminate as they were in 2021. But I do think they'll all start to show back up. In terms of what it means for us, I'm not super worried about it. We're very lucky that we get, we have built these relationships in DC, are navigating this landscape, and a lot of portfolio founders want to know that their lead investors are, deeply involved there. And there's only a handful of firms that I think are doing that at the A+ level, and I think we're one of them. And so I feel really good about our competitive differentiation amongst our competitors.
What kind of position do you want Multicoin to have within the DC circuit compared to maybe like the technical founders, the builders in the space? Obviously, you've invested in a lot of American founders, right? But what do you really want to bring to the table as an investor's perspective?
Yeah, I think what we represent is we represent kind of the collective views of all of our portfolio companies. We've got whatever 200, 250 of them by now. And we obviously hear them all share their challenges, their wish list and such. And so we're a very good aggregation point for those. And then we can try and get those items in front of the executive branch and in front of Congress. And that's what we've done. And so, what do we want to be in DC? We want to really represent industry. And I'd say specifically the part of the industry we are most closely aligned to are entrepreneurial teams. There's like stablecoin issuers, there's centralized exchanges, there's market infrastructure companies like Anchorage and FalconX and such. There's, of course, hedge funds and traders. But really, I think the most important constituency in the ecosystem are the asset issuers. At the end of the day, if there was no ETH, if there was no Sol, if there was no BTC, then obviously none of us would have jobs or any reason to exist. And so I look at my role as a VC is to really represent the collective interests of all of the founders of these tokens.
What about the founders, those 200, 250 founders that you mentioned, is something that they still are concerned about? Because I feel like now with the new administration, you're telling founders to come back to America. Everything seems sunny and happy, but it's not over, right? So what is it that they want resolved, and what do you want resolved too that you're really going out there advocating for?
There's a lot of items, but I think the single biggest thing that the founders really want is clarity around the market structure legislation. They want to know what is a security, what's not a security. And if you are a founder and you issue one of these assets, what does that mean for you? And the reality is that the executive branch on its own cannot answer that question. I think we'll probably see some guidance from the SEC under Chairman Atkins and under Commissioners Ueda and Peirce. They've already signaled that they're going to start moving in that direction. But I think to completely and definitively answer that question, it's going to require an act from Congress. And that act is what we kind of colloquially call a market structure legislation. And there's a whole bunch of subtle questions involved in that. And I think once we have that answer from Congress, then it completely opens the floodgates. If you had at that point any reticence at all, it's like, well, the United States Congress said it's legit, and here are the rules, and here's the rules of the road. And so at that point, there's just no questions left. So I think that's the really big item we're all working towards. I'm optimistic we're going to get that done in the back half of this year. The immediate item is stablecoins. I think you're going to see President Trump sign that in the next 30 days. And once that'll be a huge win. It's going to catalyze the ecosystem, and I think create a big lurching momentum forward to then get through market structure, which is admittedly a more complex subject.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we also, that tax clarity one you mentioned earlier, from a founder perspective, very important. But you mentioned something about capital formation and decentralization. I want to go back to decentralization. You guys started investing sort of pre the current structure, right? You guys started investing in sort of the ICO phase of things before the Clayton memo. And then we kind of moved into this like safe warrant without getting too deep into the weeds here on the actual capital formation piece. What has it been like to work with the different administrations just on how that affects how you're actually putting capital into these projects? Like, you going to invest always at sort of a Delaware Labs co? Like, are you looking for offshore structures? How do you guys treat that?
Well, I wish we could say we had a lot of interaction with the prior administration to contrast against, but I mean, we didn't. It was very kind of common knowledge amongst all of the lawyers in the space that engaging with the prior administration was a strictly losing proposition, even if you had the best intentions. And so industry consensus was, unless they call you, do not call them. And so we had really minimal engagement other than kind of basic compliance requirements for Multicoin as a SEC registered investment advisor. Going ahead, I don't think we don't have answers to these market structure questions, but and I generally don't want to be providing legal advice, but we are now telling portfolio founders, incorporate in the US. We don't have a strong view on state. As far as foundation for token issuance, I think that the norms will change very quickly once we have market structure, but we just don't have it yet. And so we're hesitant to have strong views, other than I think it's going to change in the not too distant future. So we're just telling people, whatever you do, just keep maximum optionality from a tax and legal perspective if you need to move jurisdictions later. And we just tell people to be open-minded because things are fluid.
Kyle, you met with the SEC Crypto Task Force, I believe. Can you expand on your experience there? I know you said you don't really have much to go on from the last administration, but another founder I spoke to recently said that this should be the norm, not the exception. Is that something you agree with? The way that you are now collaborating with regulators on crypto.
Yeah, so we had a chance to go into the SEC's office in January, or maybe it was probably February, first week of February, with one of our portfolio companies called Jito Labs, and they're an issuer of a token called JTO. We actually wrote about it on our website fairly recently if you're interested in learning more about Jito. And we went into the meeting with the intention of talking about staking and ETFs. And obviously there's a lot of people who have been, hoping that Ethereum would eventually have a staking ETF for the ETH asset. There's obviously a lot of discussion these days about Solana ETFs. I think if you look on Polymarket or Kalshi, the odds of a Solana ETF this year are, I think, north of 90%. So it's, consensus is that it's going to happen. And we agree with those odds. And so we are working with the Jito team and the SEC on figuring out, hey, can we get not only a Solana ETF, but more importantly, a staking ETF where the underlying assets in the ETF are staked using the in-protocol mechanisms so that investors of these ETF products can accrue that additional yield. Obviously, it's just good for investors to be able to earn that additional return. And so the SEC was really warm and welcoming. There was probably 10, 15 people in the room from their side, and they were asking a ton of really detailed and good questions. They were intimately familiar with staking in Ethereum and Lido, which Lido is the closest thing to Jito, but on Ethereum. They were very familiar with Solana and Jito, and they didn't come in there asking us, hey, tell us how Jito works. Instead, they came in there and they said, hey, we've read all this stuff about Jito, and here's our two very nuanced questions about how this will impact the operations of a staking ETF. And I remember I was with Greg, my general counsel, and I looked over at the Jito team, and I was like, wow, like these are phenomenal questions. And it was super cool to see that. They very clearly are in the mode of, we want to get these things out there. We want to make sure investors are protected, and we want to help investors, like if they're going to put their capital at risk here, like earn the highest possible yield that they can. And that was awesome to see. After the meeting, maybe a week or two after the meeting, the SEC actually published the meeting minutes of our meeting. They did not tell us they were going to do that. I just woke up on Twitter one day and I was like, oh, I guess
it's probably me. I was like, Kyle Samani went to the SEC
maybe
Crypto Task Force.
Maybe they leaked it to you, Eleanor, and you're the one who put it out there.
Guilty.
You're doing a great job. And so we were like, oh wow, this is the fact that they went out of their way to signal to the world, hey, like we're serious about this stuff. And now everyone in the industry is calling them, obviously, and saying like, cool, it's like, it's good to come in and talk now.
Do you anticipate staking guidance from the SEC in the near future?
Yes, I think we will, with a high probability, have staking ETFs this year. And it may be sooner than December.
I want to follow up on that. There's been this debate about tokenization. We're obviously recording at DAS today. The sort of real world assets conversation is taking up a lot of space right now, obviously with the stablecoin bill as well. And you mentioned sort of staked products being publicly traded. So Sol Strategies is one that's essentially offering synthetic exposure to Solana validators. You could look at MicroStrategy as essentially a proxy for Bitcoin, very different mechanism, but out there. Which do you think is going to happen faster? And you may have just answered this. Do you think the traditional markets are going to get more exposure to crypto assets via ETFs and staked ETFs and things like that? Or do you think we're going to see more real world securities? Like, are my Goldman shares going to be on chain? Like, which is going to happen faster?
I think you'll be able to get more crypto exposure through TradFi rails like ETFs and others, just because the distribution of that is so large. And once the assets are the switch is flipped and those assets can go out, the ability to access them will change pretty dramatically. Moving, Goldman shares, Apple shares, Tesla shares on chain, I believe you will see meaningful progress this year. I think that stuff will go from small enough as of now. That stuff is small enough scale that you probably don't even know it exists. And even me as a VC barely knows that it exists. And I think by the end of this calendar year, it will be public knowledge that, it exists at small scale, but it now exists. And I'm guessing you'll see that really ramp up in 2026. I think with the repeal of SAB 121 a few weeks ago, thank you, President Trump, all of the banks are now that they know that they can custody crypto and that they can custody tokenized securities, they're all building out that operational infrastructure internally today. And banks are pretty slow, so I don't know how much of that's going to hit, go into production this year. But I think, 17 of the top 20 financial institutions in this country are going to have public support for public permissionless crypto tokens and tokenized securities by the end of next year.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the relationship between crypto companies, investors, and the traditional institutional side. I feel like in the past, maybe they weren't as engaged because of the regulatory climate in the US. They said, hey, we're not going to touch this until we get guidance. Now, with the existing administration, what is that relationship like? Are there more conversations coming in?
Yeah, I mean, everyone in industry today is reaching out to the government. I just interviewed, Bo Hines an hour or two ago here at
Yeah,
DAS.
so did we.
And y'all also interviewed Bo too. He's a popular guy these days. And
We'll talk about it. Yeah.
and
cool.
I asked him on stage, I was like, hey, how can people get in touch with you? And he's gonna give his contact to the Blockworks team, and they're gonna put it out there that Bo's team wants to hear from industry. There's a lot of different diverse groups in industry, from miners to stakers to entrepreneurs, whatever, all these different groups, and they want to hear feedback from everybody. And seeing that, that's the industry side, and then even banking side. I mean, I was talking with Bo before we went on stage, and he's like, since the repeal of SAB 121, every bank executive from all the majors in the United States is calling them because they've all known it was coming. They were just kind of like waiting to have clarity, and they're all like, okay, this is happening now. And so the tidal wave it hasn't gotten here yet, but it's gonna get here soon.
Yeah, we had a conversation with Bo, as I joked, and you also spoke with him on stage at this event. For those who were not able to attend it, what was the biggest takeaway from the conversation, and what are you most optimistic about based on his position and everything?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway for me interacting with Bo and his team has been the speed at which they're moving. I woke up on November 6th and I was feeling pretty good. And then I was like, okay, don't get too excited. Government's slow. It's going to take a while. Temper my expectations. Don't go tell my LPs that like it's all different now. And Bo and David and the president have been working now for about 8 weeks or so, roughly, and they have wildly exceeded our expectations in terms of the pace of meetings they're taking with industry, learning, synthesizing. And then obviously we've had already, I think, 3 different EOs from the president related to crypto. Day 1 EO, SAB 121 repeal, and the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve EO. And I think probably in the next, 90 days, we'll probably have 1 to 3 more. The president is pushing hard on Congress to get stablecoin legislation done. I'm pretty sure we're going to get that done. And we're just seeing all branches of government move forward here.
Yeah, you said 30 days for the stablecoin legislation. What is that time frame based off of? Direct conversations or?
Yeah, we are very close to Senator Haggerty's team, Senator Scott's team, and Congressman Hill's team, and Lummis and others. And I think that these guys basically are on the half-yard line in kind of hammering out the final details. And I think, we just got through the committee vote last week. It was 18 to 6, I believe, was the vote. It was a fairly bipartisan vote in the Senate Banking Committee. And we know that there's a sense of urgency from Leader Thune to get this thing in front of the Senate, vote on it, get it through the House, and then put it on the president's desk.
Stablecoins, one thing, market structure is quite another, and that will sort of be the foundation of what this industry thrives off or survives off the next couple of years. Do you think we can get it done by the end of the year? I think it's a thorny topic. There's a lot of thought and a lot of voices that will go into it. The SEC is hosting its roundtable at the end of this week to talk about, digital assets. Are they securities? Are they commodities? How quickly can we get something like that done for such an important piece of legislation?
It definitely can get done this year. We're really lucky that Congressman Hill already put out a first kind of draft of market structure legislation last year. It's called FIT 21. Actually passed in the House. didn't make it through the Senate, and or I should say, Senator Schumer wouldn't bring it to a vote in the Senate. So we know there's already a base of support in the House today, and we know there's a base of support in the Senate too. And like all of that experience from his private sector days before he became a representative in Congress is just perfect for us to get to the right answers.
What about a strategic Bitcoin reserve bill? Will that get done by the end of the year?
Senator Lummis is proposing her Bitcoin Act. Well, I would love for it to happen. I'm pretty skeptical it's gonna happen. We'll see, but like right now my focus is stablecoin market structure. And look, we have an EO from the president. Like that's a phenomenal start. Getting that through Congress is gonna be a little harder.
I do want to ask, we've been talking a lot about the Republican side of things. You mentioned, obviously working with the president. We've been very impressed by the speed and everything that they've been doing. You mentioned Fit 21, which did pass the House on a bipartisan basis last year. And we saw the IRS, the CRA, which is famously like a very partisan affair, actually get overturned with bipartisan support. Are you thinking, obviously you guys are talking to everyone on the Hill, are you guys hoping that we kind of see that bipartisan support and crypto be a nonpartisan issue, or what's your view on like how to get things done there?
Yeah, I mean, crypto should be fairly bipartisan, or even maybe nonpartisan. It's kind of weird that it is partisan. I think a lot of that stems from Senator Warren, and she has, most people don't have an ideological reason to hate crypto. You might not like love it, but like 97% of people, 99% of people are just going to be looking at crypto and just be like, whatever, I don't care. And for whatever reason, Senator Warren ideologically hates crypto and like really poisoned a lot of her party to either partially agree with her or she just coerced them into at least voting aligned with her out of fear of some repercussion later. And that's really unfortunate to see. I was kind of talking this morning with Congressman Ro Khanna from Silicon Valley. He's a very well-known Democrat, and folks like Richie Torres and a bunch of others. And a lot of these guys, Democrats, understand the issues. They are like, yeah, this is good for America. And certainly they have no reason to oppose it. And so we do see at least a handful of Democrats that want to take meetings with us, are supportive of this stuff and they want to get it done. And I think a lot of those folks are going to reach out to their colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle to try and get this stuff through. Congressman Khanna this morning was very clear. He said, if we screw this up again in 26 and in 28 with crypto, we know we're going to eat it. And so they're very well aware, and I'm optimistic that a lot of folks on the Democratic side are going to come around.
Last question, Kyle. Aside from everything we've discussed so far, what else are you watching that you think our listeners should pay attention to?
I think the most interesting thing to look at as it pertains to like understanding the role of crypto in America is stablecoins issued. I think we're at 180 billion plus or minus, maybe it's 200 billion right now, something like that, between Circle and Tether. And that to me is like the most important thing to think about, because that literally represents people going out of their way to acquire dollars on chain. Some of those people may have kept dollars in the bank account anyways. I have a lot of, my dollars are on chain, but most of that growth is coming from people overseas who are choosing to opt into exiting their local fiat currency, whether it's pesos, yuan, yen, euros, whatever, and buy dollars. And that to me is like, for the U.S. national interest, probably the single most important thing. It doesn't get a lot of the numbers are already so big, but to me that is like the most important thing to keep an eye on, to like really signal the strategic importance of crypto to the United States.
Amazing. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for coming on Crypto in America today. We loved having you.
Jacqueline, pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for the time, guys. Love the show.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.